Okay, so this is Professor Gilmet, and today what we want to do is talk about contingency tables, and we're going to explain them using StatCrunch. Okay, I think StatCrunch is a very valuable tool. It's super cheap, and it just does a much better job than the TI calculator. So, basically, in this video, we'll explore the relationship between two categorical variables. Now remember, a categorical variable is one where you can answer a yes/no question. All right. So let us look at something we are all familiar with, grades, right? Where all are students, and so we're familiar with that. In this example, I have created a fictional table that shows us grades and gender for a hypothetical class. This is totally made up. I didn't actually look at this so that the data is a little bit cleaner. Okay. So here we have gender and grade. All right, so those are the two categories, and then the variables for grade are A, B, C, D, and FW. And then for the gender category, we have the variables male and female. All right, and then just some counts in here. And what I did was I actually went ahead and put those in StatCrunch, so you can see that here, the grades male, female, and the A, B, C, D, FW with the counts. All right. Hint, in my stat lab, any table of values usually has a little box in the upper right hand corner that will paste the data into StatCrunch for you. So I was super nice, and if you look right here, okay, so right here in this particular my stat lab question, if you click on it, this will open in StatCrunch. Alternatively, you could copy it to a clipboard and just paste it into StatCrunch, but a lot of homework questions are going to look like this, right? So you just look for that little box, right, and the open StatCrunch option, and then you don't have to type all of this stuff in there, okay? So, in looking at this table, what can we see? We can see that males earned more A's than females. But does this mean that males actually do better in this course than females do? And so if we look, 4 males earned an A and only 2 females earned an A. And so are males outperforming females? Okay? Well, it turns out that percentages or relative frequencies are more helpful in situations like this, where the counts vary among the categories. Right? If you look, the sum of all the males is 40, but the sum of all the females is only 28. So we actually have fewer females than males. So maybe they're at about the same rate, right? So when we look at percentages based on the totals in the margins of the table, we are finding a marginal distribution, okay? And this table doesn't actually have any margins to it. The margins would be down here, where I actually had total for the male and the female, and then the margins over here would be where I had the total for the A, B, C, D, and FW, okay? So those are the margins, right? We have 2 ways of calculating the marginal distribution. We could have a row where we express the row variables as a percent of the total, or a column where we express the column variables as a percent of the total. And here, the preposition really helps you determine how to calculate the percentages. So here are some examples of questions you could be asked. Okay, so what percent of students are female? So here, the of the students indicates that this is a marginal distribution because this is out of all of them. And also because the condition are female is an entire column, right? And so that indicates a column calculation. Now, I want to switch over to StatCrunch, right? So we're doing a column calculation of what percent of students are female. So here I go to StatCrunch, okay, and all right, we're going to show everything now. What I want to do is I actually want to go ahead and hit stat. And what we're going to do is we're going to go down to tables, and we can actually see that contingency table is an option in StatCrunch. So this is really nice. Now, we do not have data, okay? If we had data, I would actually have like a whole 4 A's, I would have 8 B's, I would have 16 C's, and then male would be next to them, and it would be a much bigger table. This is really a summary of what is going on here, okay? These are not all of the actual grades. And so the columns then are the male and the female. And you'll notice that to select more than one, you need to do shift click or control click, depending upon whether you have a Mac or a PC. So if I just click male and then try to click female, it won't work. I have to click male and then I have to hold down control and click female. The row labels are the actual grades. So the rows are the grades and the columns are the male, female. All right. And so what we need is a column percent, okay? Because we're doing a column calculation, all right? What percentage of the students are female, okay? And you can turn this chi-squared test off. We may talk about this at some point during the semester. Your class may talk about the chi-squared test, but we're just simply going to go ahead and hit compute at this time. All right, and when I do, I get this beautiful table here that shows us that in the margin we have 100%. So this is 100% of the columns. Okay, and we can see that we have 40 male students and 28 female students, and so. Right, and so what we see is we have, but down here is 100%, right? So I know now I've got 40 and 28 out of the 68, but I've got 100% down here. So I can't actually tell what percentage of female students there are out of the total, but I could look at these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my options, I'm going to click edit, and I'm just going to change it to a row percent from a column percent, okay? And click compute. Now I'm still calculating for the column, but now you can see I've got 40 males and 40 female students, okay? But 58.82% are male and 41.18% are female out of 100 total students here, right? So here I can see that in this margin of the bottom of the columns, in this margin at the bottom of the columns, I have 58.82 male students and 41.18 female students. And yes, I did flip this to a row percent, but just so it could tell me what the marginal percentage was. Okay? I think the big thing to think about is not whether I did a row or a column calculation, but the fact that what it's giving me is the percentage of females out of the total. So the answer to my question here, right, what percentage of the students are female? The answer to that question is 41.18%, okay? And then what percent of students earned a C? So here, the of the students indicates that this is a marginal distribution because it's the condition earned a C. And the C is a row. It's an entire row. And so this is going to be a row calculation. Okay? And so now I look, we've got a row here, but C is 100%. Well, that doesn't make any sense, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to edit, and I'm just going to switch it to column and click compute. And now it will adjust for me a little bit. And so now I can see that each of these 8, 20, 40, 28, these are all going to add up to 100. And so these are my marginal distribution. Oh, this column right here is the marginal distribution for each of these rows. Okay? So this column has the marginal distribution for each of these rows. And that's really why it's kind of reversed. But don't let that mess you up. Just understand that you wouldn't want to have 100, 100, 100. You want to have something that changes, right? And so what was our question? Our question was, what percent of students earned a C? And so here I can look and I can say, hey, look, 41.18% of students earned a C out of the 68 students total that I looked at. All right. And again, I know that a lot of these percentages look very similar, and that's just because this is made up data. Okay. So the answer to what percentage of students earned a C, that's going to be this 41.18%. Please don't ever put 100% unless there's unless there's zeros everywhere else. Okay? Now, a marginal distribution is of all, right? All students, all cars, something like that. And by a variable, right? And the values are in the margins of the table. The calculation is reversed in StatCrunch because you need a column for the margin of rows and vice versa. Okay? So just a little hint right there. The calculation is going to be reversed in StatCrunch. If you're doing a column calculation, you actually need to do the row. If you're doing a row calculation, you need to use the column because you have to have a column that's the summary of all the rows, and you need to have a row which is a summary of all the columns. Okay? And again, just don't let that confuse you or cause you consternation. Just don't let it all be hundreds. Okay? Now, we can obtain other information by stating a condition first. All right? And so when we look at variables in terms of another variable, basically we are calculating a conditional distribution. And if you've watched enough of my videos, you know that I say often, in math, we call things what they are. The first one was a marginal distribution because it was in the margins of the table. This one is a conditional distribution because we're stating a condition. So there are as many conditional calculations as twice the number of cells because you can go both directions in each cell. And again, the prepositions really help us get started. Okay? Here are some examples of the questions you could be asked that would be a conditional distribution. What percent of females earned less than a C? Oh. Well, here the of females indicates it's a column calculation based on the fact that everyone is a female, right? I'm only interested in the condition female. So the percentage of females should total 100. And then what we'll do is we'll look at the percentages of D and WF in the female column. So if I go here, I do have my column. If I look in my female column, I see at the bottom it adds up to 100%. So each of these values here is going to add up to 100%. So if I look, 7% of all females earned an A. 21.43% of females earned a B. 43% of females earned a C. Okay? But what I have here is 21.43 and 7.14 that basically earned less than a C. These are not passing grades. Now here's something cool that I want to show you how to do in StatCrunch. You can actually use StatCrunch as a calculator. If you go to data and you go ahead over to compute, you can actually compute an expression. And the expression that we would like to compute is 21.43 7.43, and I'm just typing this on the number pad, plus 7.14, and that's going to be my, basically my less than C. And when I click compute, I'm actually going to get a nice little less than a C right here. And so the sum of 21.43 and 7.14 is 28.57%. And so the answer to what percentage of females earn less than a C is this 28.57% right here. Okay? That's pretty cool, right? Now, what percentage of C's are earned by females? Well, here the C's indicate it's a row calculation based on C, right? I'm looking at only C's, and then of those who earned a C, how many of them were females? And so we're going to look at the percentage of females in the C row. Okay, so let me go ahead and go to options and click edit. And now, instead of going by column percent, I'm going to go by row percent. I'm going to click compute. And as I look at this, I can see now that the C row adds up to 100%. And I can see now that the females earned 42.86% of all the C's. Males earn the other 57.14% of the C's. So the answer to what percent of C's are earned by females, the answer to that is 42.86%, or whatever decimal place your teacher is asking for. Okay? Now note, a conditional distribution is of a variable and by another variable. So you can see of C's, that's a variable. C's is a variable. Of females, you know, that's a variable. Okay? And so you've got a variable and another variable. Now, the last type is the joint distribution. And this means we are looking at the overall percentage of a combined or joint row and column variable. So this sets itself apart in that we have two conditions. And so here's some examples of the questions you could be asked, right? What percentage of students were male and earned an A? Well, here the of students means we're either looking at a marginal or a joint distribution. But because of the and joining the two variables, we have a joint distribution. All right, so that's because of the and right there. Now, so what does this look like? Well, what I'm doing here is, in my contingency table, options, edit, I'm not calculating a row, I'm not calculating a column, I'm actually interested in the percent of the total. So that's these first three up here. And then I'm going to click compute. And in my beautiful contingency table, I can see that if you take 4 and you divide it by 68, what you'll get is 5.88%. And so males earning an A is 5.88% of the total number of students. And so if I look at my question, what percentage of students were male and earned an A? The answer to that question is 5.88%. Interestingly, if you are thinking about the marginal distribution, remember our marginal distribution answers are actually right here also. So another way of doing the marginal distribution, if you're wigged out by the whole columns are rows and rows are columns thing. Okay? And so that's what that looks like. Now, note, a joint distribution is identifiable by the use of a conjunction. Usually, there are some weird things in the English language which would make a joint distribution, but not use a conjunction, or maybe be marginal and have a conjunction in it. You know, there's just some weird ways to write stuff. But usually a joint distribution is going to have a conjunction in it, right? One last type of question we can ask is, are the grades independent of gender? Well, look, this is a really important question to ask, okay? If you're a boy, are you more likely to earn a better grade? That would be bad. This would indicate some sort of bias in the grading, which would not be good. So what we would expect is that your grade does not depend on your gender. That's what we would hope, okay? If there's no bias, your grade should not depend on your gender. If that's true, then the percentage of each grade should be close for each gender. Essentially, the rule of thumb is variables are independent, categories are independent, when the percentages of the variables are close together. And they're dependent when one or more of the percentages are not close together, right? If your grade does not depend on your gender, then each gender should be equally likely to get each type of grade. If males earn a lot more of one type of grade or a lot less of one type of grade, then maybe there is some sort of dependency on your gender, right? If those percentages are not close together. And so one way to look at this is a bar chart or stacked bar chart. This is the way they do it in our book. If the bars are relatively close to the same by percentage, you cannot do relative counts, then you can say they are independent. If they are not, then you should conclude that the variables have some degree of dependence. Okay? If they are not close to the same percentages, if the percentages are not close together, you should conclude that the variables have some degree of dependence. Okay? I'm not saying how much or anything like that. So how do I do that? Now, this took me a minute to do, so I want to help you save some time and effort here, okay? If you go to graph and you try to do the bar plot with either the data or the summary, you'll only be able to look at either males or females, but not both at the same time. It turns out that under graph, what you want to do is a chart. And you want to look at the charts for the different columns, right? Because I have these guys here, right? And so I'm going to use male and female. The row labels are going to be my grades. And of course, it defaults to horizontal split, but I actually prefer vertical bars. And then of course, you should use some good labeling, especially if you're going to print this chart. I mean, if it's for homework, that's one thing. But if you're going to print this chart, if you're going to put it in a report or something like that, make sure you use good labeling techniques. And then we are going to click compute. Now, if you look at this, right, you can see that the males are higher in every single one. But think about this. Why are the males higher in every single one? The males are higher in every single one because there are more males. What? It's shocking. This is a frequency, okay? I can't do that. What did it say I had to do? It says I have to look at the percentages, okay? You can't look at just, you got to go by percentages. You can't look at just the frequency. So what I need to do is I actually need to calculate the percentages and put them in here. To get rid of this less than C, I'm going to click edit. I'm going to click column and delete, and I'm just going to delete that column right there, so that here what I can do is I can put males by percentage, and I can put females by percentage. Okay? I'm just going to scoot that over a little bit. And now how would I figure that out? Well, I don't want to use a pure count, right? So what I'd like to do is I would like to do the row percent. As you can see here, the percent of males earning an A and the percent of females earning an A adds up to 100%. Okay, and then I've got these guys over here, which are looking pretty good. And so I'm going to actually go ahead and do 67%, 57%, 57%, 57%, and then 67%. And over here, the females are 33%, 43%, 43%, 43%, and 41%. I just went ahead and rounded that to 67 and put it there. I rounded this to 57 and put it here. I rounded this to 33, put it here. I rounded this to 43 and put it here. And the nice thing to note is that the sum of these two is 100. The sum of these two is 100. The sum of these two is 100. This all adds up to 100. And so because that all adds up to 100, what I can do is I can now look at the graph of the chart, columns, but instead of doing the counts, I want to do the percentages. And again, I'm going to do it by grades. Okay, and I would like to look at the vertical bars split. And when I click compute, you can see there's a big difference here between the A's and the F's. And there's a bit of a difference between the B's, the C's, and the D's, even by percentages. Okay? And so instead of looking at split like this next to each other, the other thing that you can do, which our book recommends, is to look at the stacked. And the stacked is fun. And so now you'll notice, oh, something's a little off because this should be 100 and it's not. What happened here? Oh, this should be 33. Graph, chart, columns, percentage, percentage, stacked, compute. Ah, there, they're all 100 now. So you can see all the bars are 100. And you can see there's a big difference between this bar and this bar, right? These bars are not the same size all the way across. These bars are, okay? These bars are. These bars, not so much, okay? And so it looks like there's some independence among getting a B, C, or a D, but it seems like there's some sort of dependence on gender for getting an A or a WF. And so as I look at these, all of the blue should be the same size and all of the red should be the same size when they're like this. When we do the split, the red and the blue bars should be the same size as we look at it like this. And this makes us sad. Why does this make us sad? All right, this makes us sad because now the grades are, the grades percentages are not close together. And so that means that there's some sort of dependence between gender and grade. And that's what I should conclude, that the variables have some degree of dependence. Now remember, this is made up data. And it's a fairly small sample, so you got to be careful about that. But yeah, there's some degree of dependence between the two variables. This concludes our video. I hope you really learned something about StatCrunch and types of distributions that we can have with contingency tables. And if you did, then that makes us happy.